I'd just like to start off by saying I think this is a movie that needs to be remade. Not because it's like cheesy or anything, but because it's a really good thriller. I was kind of tired when I watched it, but I was really into it. My girlfriend was watching it with me, and she was about to fall asleep when we started, but she stayed awake for almost the entire movie just because it was really exciting. But it was a made-for-TV movie. It was never theatrically released in the US, so not a whole lot of people know about it. So I think it's one that even if Spielberg were to remake it, I don't think he would, but if somebody were to get the rights to do this movie, it would make a really good, cheap indie movie. You could probably make this one for, I would guess, about $15,000 if you know somebody with a truck. Anyway, that being said, this was a good movie that Spielberg made. This is one of those that when a young director looks at a script like this, I'm pretty sure Spielberg probably got really excited and thought, I can make this movie, and I can make this movie good. This movie is really going to help out my career a lot. I imagine this is one of the first projects that he got that he was really excited about. I would be. It's a very taut, well-told story. His assistant reportedly found the story while he was reading Playboy, which he claims to have been reading looking for stories. Sure you were. He managed to make the movie in 13 days. Actually went 3 days over the original shooting schedule, and it left him only 10 days to edit it before it debuted. So you're talking about a whole movie that was made in 23 days, which is just amazing. Nowadays, it's easier to consider that because editing is, point and click, but there they had to assemble the film, and it's kind of mind-blowing that he was able to make a movie this well that quickly. It was like filmmaker boot camp, I'm guessing, which probably really helped to set him apart as this guy can make a good movie. He actually holds this as the benchmark for what he can do in a very brief time span. It's also a very taut thriller, and I would recommend watching this one to anybody. I don't know if it's on Netflix. It was at one point. I know if you still have stuff shipped to your house, you can get it that way because it was on my queue for a while. So let's talk about what he does really well here. He never shows you the trucker. You see his arm sticking out, from distant shots. You can see a profile or something, but you never see the trucker. The trucker is not the problem. The problem is the truck itself. He anthropomorphizes the truck, essentially. You see the guy get out, and you see his shoes sticking out at the gas station, but that's about it. That's the only time, as far as you know, that the guy even gets out of the truck. He makes it a monster rather than a machine being driven by a monster. And on to a tirade about this, considering the fact that we learned this inside of Jaws. The brilliance of it was that he almost never showed the shark. Why is it that we have completely forgotten in the CGI world that you should not show the monster? And not only that, don't humanize the villain. If this was made now, then there would be a full 30 minutes explaining the character of the trucker and why he kills people, psychoanalyzing him. It's a lot scarier if this guy's just some lunatic that's trying to kill people on the highway. Why do we feel the need to make our villains relatable? I don't want to relate to a villain. I want to be scared of a villain. That's one of the things that made Joker so terrifying inside of The Dark Knight, is the fact that he had no origin story, and Christopher Nolan has made it clear that he was very intentional about that, and he did not want an origin story. He just wanted this force of evil to just show up out of nowhere. I love the fact that the trucker is never explained in this movie. He's just a faceless evil. He's the brain of the monster that is the truck. There's no explanation, nothing. This guy just has the problem of a truck is trying to kill him, and he's trying to deal with that. Tirade over. I really don't have a whole lot of complaints that couldn't be blamed on things like budget or time constraint. He builds the tension very well, and it does the editing thing that I was talking about last week. When the truck is making its first initial attack, when he's coming up behind him, he starts bumping him, and the guy's trying to get away. There's a lot of really quick edits and makes everything feel very fast-paced and very frantic and hectic, as opposed to frazzling. Creates a feeling of panic inside of this scene, and once the guy thinks he's safe, we go into some very long, slower-moving shots. The build of the character's development is well handled. You have the initial annoyance and then realization there's something wrong with this guy. Then there's the why won't he leave me alone? And then there's finally the breaking point of this guy is legitimately trying to kill me. The final shark attack is when he attacks him in the phone booth. That's when, alright, it's face down time. There's a brilliant expositional setup at the beginning. The guy is driving along and he's listening to the radio, and he keeps changing back and forth between different stations. Every now and then you'll hear a brief blur of music, then there'll be a weather report, there's a traffic report, small town news stories, that kind of thing. And he finally stops for the longest time on a guy making a prank call to the Census Bureau. This guy is essentially saying that he's technically the husband in the house, but his wife is the head of the household. And he doesn't feel honest about checking that block, even though he's literally the head of the household, but his wife is the one that calls the shots. And it's kind of humorous and kind of sad. Even though it's not about the guy driving the car, mentally, because he's the only character that you see at this point, it sets up associating him with this character who is very meek and doesn't stand up for himself. It's really clever because it does not say anything about the character that you're meeting and you're going to be seeing for the rest of the movie, but it creates a mental association. I cannot think of another incident where that particular method was used. The scene where he talks to his wife was actually added later. It was filmed when they decided to lengthen it for a theatrical release in Europe. So that whole thing about finding out about the not fight the night before was not in the original, so for exposition, that was all you had originally, was that radio talk show host. And it was a very, very clever way of introducing a character, especially inside of a short film, of not introducing the character, but introducing the type of character, I guess, would be the way to put that. I don't know whose idea that was, because I haven't read the short story, though I kind of want to now. I want to see if that's in there or not. I've never seen The French Connection, however, I have seen Bullet. Both of those claim to have two of the best car chases in history. There's a lot of shots that he gets while fast-paced car driving. Some of it was edited to make it look like it was going faster than it was, because you see he's going 90, and then you see the car go by and you're like, he's not going 90. But there's a lot of shots that he got that I didn't know you could do in 1971 with the cameras that they had back then. So I'm wondering how much of that was Spielberg managing to figure out ways to pull these shots off. I did disagree with this one shot, not necessarily because it was wrong or poorly handled, just I personally would have done it differently. It's this one right here. What's going on here is he has just realized that the truck outside is empty. Presumably, the psycho driving it is somewhere inside his diner. Whether or not he actually was or not, you never really find out, but it's him thinking it could be anybody in here. At least I think that's what the thought process is supposed to be. And if it was me that was doing that shot, I would have put more people in it. So it gives the audience the thought, they start scanning the crowd, trying to figure out who it is. There's also a voiceover that recurs throughout the movie. His inner dialogue. I never like it when that happens. This one's awkwardness could have been solved in one of two ways. One, get rid of it completely. That one would be a little bit less effective because you wouldn't hear a lot of the information that you're getting. It's stuff that would be extremely difficult for an actor to portray with just facial expression, because it's very specific what he's debating about. The second one would be to give him somebody in the car with him for him to talk to. That would have shortchanged the inner struggle and the character development to have him with somebody. If that movie was made now, that's probably how they would have done it. The third way to fix it is introduce it earlier. It does not happen until you've been in Act 2 for a little bit. And so when it starts, your first thought is not, it's inner dialogue, it's that's poorly edited because I can see his mouth isn't moving. This is the way I would have solved it. I would have started it earlier, so it's already part of the movie. When you have an aesthetic thing like voiceover or inner dialogue that the audience can hear, you want to put that very early on in the movie to let the audience know that it's going to be a recurring thing. Yes, he is Steven Spielberg, but at this point, I'm older than he was. What am I doing with my life? This is the first time of the 4 things that I've watched at this point that you can tell that he storyboards everything extremely meticulously. I'll show you stuff later, months from now. He actually draws, and he plans out all of his shots in cartoon form. This one, I imagine, was one of the first times where he just went nuts and probably worked for days, weeks even, working on the storyboards for this thing, because he knew exactly what shots he wanted to cut to when, especially inside of the initial charge. Most people, there would only be a couple of things that you would cut back and forth to, but he only had 13 days to film this. To the rearview mirror, then the guy's face, then the truck coming, and then a shot from in front of the truck coming towards the car, and then a slightly wide shot of both of the cars, and their gap is closing, and then a shot in front of the car, looking back at the truck, and it's just getting big and ominous. Another shot inside the rearview mirror, and then a shot of the speedometer, and it just keeps cutting back and forth all over the place. And he had to have planned everything, because number of cutbacks and forths that he takes here, you're talking about 8, 9, 10 different setups that he would have had to have come up with and put together in order to have those shots when he needed them. This is when you really see the amount of planning that Spielberg would have to have put into this thing. I imagine the producers noticed that as well and said, this kid is very professional about it. He's not just banking on the fact that it'll work out. He makes it work. This also has what I believe is a precursor to one of the most famous shots inside of Jaws, and that, of course, is the objects and mirror thing. There's a shot where the guy looks down at his side view mirror, and you see the truck just getting huge inside of that. And this reportedly is one of Spielberg's favorite projects that he's ever done. He is just extremely proud of how he got this movie to turn out. He claims to watch it regularly and just go, I cannot believe I pulled that off when I was 23 years old. But I imagine the first time he saw a rearview mirror with the sticker, objects and mirror closer than they appear, that was the first thing that popped into his head was, oh gosh, I wish that had been on the car that I used for Duel. So I think he probably filed that away and was just waiting for a chance to use that joke inside of another movie sometime. So that's really all that I have to talk about this movie. You need to go watch this movie. It's very exciting. It's not very long. For those of you with kids, it's pretty clean. I think there's 2 curse words in it. It's just really cool. That was this week's Spielberg project. Next week, we will be watching Something Evil, which is another made-for-TV movie that he did the next year. So he was 24 when that one came out. It's considered a precursor to the storyline idea for Poltergeist. I'm looking forward to that one. I'm going to be skipping another one that I believe came out between the two that, again, I cannot find anywhere. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow Ben and James on Twitter, and I'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll have some more storylines.